Hello and welcome to this lecture video. And so in this lecture video, I'm going to discuss or provide an overview of some of the decisions that managers often face. And so what we're going to be talking about in this series of lecture videos are how to address and solve some decisions that managers frequently face, such as should we drop a product line? Should we further process a product? If we have two products and we only have enough time on the machine to make product one and only half of product two, how do we allocate that time? Okay, how do we allocate that time? So we have to go over some basic things that we talked about in some earlier chapters, which is the idea of a relevant cost or a relevant benefit. Okay, a relevant cost or benefit is one that differs in total between two alternatives. So if I have some benefit that's the same in alternative one as it is in alternative two, then it doesn't really matter. If I'm trying to evaluate between two software packages, software package A gives me savings of $1,000 a month. Software package B also gives me cost savings of $1,000 a month. That's just not relevant because they're both the same. They're both $1,000 a month. And so at that point, I might just focus solely on the cost. Okay. Same thing with the cost. We've talked before about sunk costs in the past, and what we've said about sunk costs, or the example that I've given, if you've gone to a movie and 5 minutes into the movie you know it's bad, do you stay or do you leave? And a lot of people say, well, I stay, and I'll say, well, why do you stay? And they'll say, I stay because I paid for the ticket. Well, if you leave the movie, you paid for the ticket. If you stay in the movie, you paid for the ticket. The price of the ticket after you've paid for it and you can't get a refund is no longer relevant because it doesn't differ between the two alternatives of alternative one, staying in the movie, and alternative two, leaving the movie. So to recap, if we have a cost or benefit that does not differ between two alternatives, it's not relevant. If it differs, then it becomes relevant. Okay? So what we say about avoidable costs would be costs that we can eliminate. So if we were to eliminate a division, maybe we don't need the division manager anymore. Maybe we can lay them off, honestly. And if we can lay them off, then what happens is we don't have to pay their salary and their benefits anymore. That's an avoidable cost. Or maybe advertising. We don't have to advertise for a division that makes a product which we no longer make. That would also be an avoidable cost because the advertising goes away because we're not advertising for that product anymore. So if we look at the next page, we do have a few quick check problems right over here. Which of the following is not a differential cost? Well, this goes back to some earlier chapters. Which of the following is not a differential cost? Well, materials is variable, and that will be differential. Labor is the same. Variable is differential. So if we make more products, we have more materials, labor, and variable overhead. Those would be differential costs. Fixed overhead, we are not treating as differential. So basically, if we get some special order that comes in for a special product, and we have to make that product, so we will have additional materials, labor, and variable overhead, but our fixed overhead will stay the same because we are assuming we still have the capacity to make that product. So in that case, it doesn't change how much we have to pay for rent on the factory because we can make it in the factory that we have. So if that's true, fixed overhead is not going to be relevant. And I say often. Doesn't mean always, often. Opportunity costs are costs foregone from choosing, or benefits foregone from choosing one alternative over another, and opportunity costs are incremental costs. Which of the following costs should not be taken into consideration when making a decision? The sunk cost. Okay? So let's talk about some types of decisions that managers frequently face. The first one would be, should we engage in additional processing of a product? And we will go through each one of these. Not in this lecture video, but in additional lecture videos. We'll do this one in this lecture video. The decision to drop a product line is another Another decision that managers often face, the decision to make or buy a product, special orders, scrap or rework products, and then also about which products should we make first. Okay? So let's look at the first decision, which is the additional processing decision. That's the first one I want to talk about. So we say over here, sometimes companies need to decide whether they want to sell their product as is or further process it and then sell it for a higher price. Okay? So that's what we're saying. And maybe we could sell it in a partially completed stage or further process it and sell it at a higher price. So let's look at this example. Our Bridge computer makes personal computers. Bridge has already decided to discontinue its Model 250 computer. Currently, it has 5,000 partially completed units on hand. To date, the company has spent $800 per unit or $4 million to bring these computers to their current stage of completion. The company believes that cost of an additional $400 per unit must be incurred to complete these computers. So here's our costs incurred to date, that $800 that we were talking about right over there. And then we have our $400 per unit. That's our additional cost right there. Okay. Continuing on to the next page, we say the price of our Model 250 computer has fallen to $1,000. Okay. And that's per unit because the company announced that they are going to discontinue the product. The $1,000 is less than the total cost of producing those computers. Okay, the 800 plus the 400 gives us the 1,200. Okay, so what Bridge is thinking about, well, maybe what we should do is rather than fixing them up for that additional $400 and then selling them for the 1,000, maybe what we should do is just sell the computers as they are in a partially completed stage. And that's what we're looking at. Should Bridge Computers sell the computers as they are in a partially completed stage or fix them up and sell them for a higher price? If they decide to sell them in the partially completed stage, they sell them for $500 a unit. Okay? So the question becomes, should we finish the computers and sell them for $1,000 or sell them as is for $500? Okay? When you have a long word problem like this, you have a lot going on, and it can be easy to become overwhelmed. So the first thing you want to do is figuring out which things in this word problem are not relevant. And the first one is those sunk costs. Those $800 that we have per unit that we spent to date, that $800 per unit that was on the prior page, consisting of the materials, labor, variable overhead, and fixed overhead, $800, that's sunk. We've already paid for it. So whether we sell these computers in their partially completed stage or fix them up and sell them, it doesn't matter. So let's just not even worry about it. Okay? So the next one is we have our incremental revenue. So incremental revenue means the difference in revenue between two alternatives. So if I look at alternative 1 is to sell the computers for $1,000. Alternative 2 is to sell them for $500. So the incremental revenue is $500, which is that 1,000 divided, subtract the 500. So 1,000 revenue, alternative 1, minus the 500 revenue, alternative 2, gives me that $500 incremental revenue. Now let's look at the incremental cost. So if we say alternative 1, which is, we'll just say to sell as is, there is no additional cost. But alternative 2, to fix and sell, $400. So that means the incremental cost is $400. Okay? So now what we can do to help us to solve this problem is we can set up a table. Okay? So I have my revenue and I have less my prior production costs. Now I did include these in here just to show you that why they don't matter. And the reason that they don't matter is because they're not relevant. And the reason that they're not relevant is because it's not a differential cost. The reason it's not a differential cost is because it's a sunk cost. And so because it's the same in alternative 1 as it is in alternative 2, the difference is 0, and so it just doesn't matter. So here I can say sell as is, I'll say alternative 1, and I'll say fix and sell for alternative 2. So then my revenue over here, if I sell it as is, remember it's $500. If I fix it up and sell it, it's $1,000, which gives me the difference in revenue of $500, which is my incremental revenue. Okay? Less my prior production costs, I just included that in there, but because I'm going to be looking at this column to help me solve the problem, I don't even really need this in here. But I put it in there just to show you why it doesn't matter. Okay? If I sell it as is, I have 0 additional costs. Okay? Because I sell it as is. I'm not going to fix them up. But if I fix it up and try to sell it for $400, then I do, sell it for $1,000, I do have additional $400 costs. So then my incremental cost is $400. Now I can calculate my gain or loss on a unit basis. I can take my revenue minus my prior production costs, which gives me a loss of $300 right over here. I can take my revenue minus my prior production costs minus my additional processing costs, which gives me $200. And then what I can see is I have $100 right over here. And what is this $100 telling you? Well, if we look at this, we can see what we should do, which is to fix and sell it. Okay? We should fix it up and sell it, because I only lose $200 a unit if I do that. If I sell it as is, I lose $300 a unit. So I'd want to fix it up and sell it. The difference between these two alternatives, and by the way, this is the incremental profit right over here. The difference between these two alternatives is the $100. Okay? The $100 translates, these two are inputs to that incremental profit, which is right over here. Okay? This is our incremental profit. We get $100 more profit from fixing per unit, from fixing it up and selling it versus selling it as is. Okay? So this concludes this lecture video, and then in other lecture videos we're going to talk about some other decisions that managers come across. Okay? Thank you.